Early in the morning, the sky was dotted with thin wisps of clouds, the air cooler after last night's rain. Gentle rays of sunlight slipped through the leaves, illuminating the rugged highland landscape. Tuan had left home at dawn, driving to the construction site he was overseeing. Today was a big day. He needed to check progress and push the workers to stay on schedule. His white pickup truck rolled to a stop at the site. Half-built houses stood in rows, stacks of bricks piled high, and groups of workers bustled about. Tuan stepped out, nodding to a few workers before striding into the construction zone. A site manager approached, reporting respectfully. "Morning, Mr. Tuan. Today the housing section is at 80% of the planned progress, but the western foundation still needs more time to reinforce. The soil, there's pretty weak." Tuan mulled it over for a moment, then nodded, his sharp gaze sweeping the site. "I want that area finished on time, but quality comes first. If we need more manpower, let me know." The manager nodded, quickly jotting down notes. Tuan then headed to the workers' area, joining them under a simple tarp shading them from the sun. "Everyone holding up okay? Any issues?" he asked. A worker wiped sweat from his brow and grinned. "It's tough work on a site, sure, but we're keeping up with the pace. Just hoping to wrap this up soon so we can move on to the next job." Tuan nodded, handing water bottles to a few of them, his tone encouraging. "Keep it up, guys. There'll be bonuses for those who do well and stay safe." The workers chuckled, their spirits lifting. To Tuan, the crew was the backbone of the project's timeline. After a while, he left the break area, continuing his rounds through the site, inspecting every detail with care. Watching the bricks slot into place, Tuan felt a quiet satisfaction. He knew each project wasn't just a job, it was a lifeline for countless workers and, eventually, a home for families. Once he'd finished his checks, Tuan stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the crisp mountain air. The work kept him busy, but he always made a point to oversee things personally, to ensure everything stayed on track. A new day had begun, bringing with it the weight of responsibilities and challenges ahead. After reviewing the construction progress, CEO Tuan stood before the blueprints, lost in thought for a long moment. His mind drifted to Tu Tien, the resilient girl struggling to make ends meet. An idea sparked. Could he find her a suitable job at the site? He nodded to himself, then turned to his assistant, Huang, who stood waiting nearby. "Huang, go find Tu Tien. Tell her I've got a job for her. Something light, nothing too taxing." Hun froze. A shadow flickered across her eyes, but she quickly regained her professional composure. "Yes, sir, I'll go right away." She said the words, but irritation flared within her. Why was Tuan so fixated on helping this poor girl? She gripped her phone tightly, a glint of jealousy flashing in her gaze. On the way to Tu Tien's cave, Huang pulled over, adjusting her hair and glasses. She wanted to make the gap between herself and Tu Tien glaringly obvious, to let her know she'd never measure up to someone like her. Arriving at the cave, Huang stepped out of the car, her eyes scanning the surroundings with a grimace. The place was run down, filthy, little better than a wilderness in her view. Tu Tien emerged from inside, catching sight of Huang and blinking in surprise. "You're here for me?" Huang crossed her arms, her expression dripping with disdain. "Mr. Tulan sent me. He says he wants to help you get a steady job." Tu Tien flinched slightly. She hadn't expected Tuan to go so far as to find her work. "What could I do?" Huang let out a cold scoff, eyeing her up and down before smirking. "I'd suggest you wash up first before showing up at the site. That stench of yours might bother people." Tu Tien's hands clenched. Huang's words sliced into her pride like a knife. But she didn't bite back. She just stared silently at the woman in front of her. Huang pressed on, her tone laced with mockery. "I'm not driving you there. If you want the job, walk to the site yourself. Consider it a way to prove you actually want to change." With that, Huang turned on her heel, a triumphant smirk curling her lips as she walked away. Tu Tien stood still, her heart heavy. She didn't care about the insults, but what gnawed at her was why Tuan cared so much about her. In the end, she made up her mind to walk to the site. The road was long and Huang's words had been spiteful, but she wanted to seize the chance Tuan had offered, to test herself. Along the rugged path to the construction site, Tu Tien walked with a resolve in her eyes stronger than ever before. The sun blazed overhead, its harsh light pouring down on the bustling construction site. Tu Tien arrived, her clothes dusted with dirt from the road. Her breath came in short bursts after the long walk, but her eyes burned with determination. Tuan stood on the scaffolding, overseeing the project's progress. When he turned and caught sight of Tu Tien stepping onto the site, his gaze lingered for a moment. "You're here," he said, his voice calm and steady. Tu Tien nodded. "I want to know what my job is." Tuan gave a faint smile. "I've arranged some suitable tasks for you, nothing too heavy, but they'll require attention to detail." He gestured toward an area near the storage shed, where a group of female workers were sifting sand and preparing building materials. "You'll help clean up lightweight materials, assist with inventory, and bring water to the crew. It's not too strenuous, but it needs diligence and care." Tu Tien nodded without a hint of complaint or hesitation. "I'll do it well." She dove into the work. Though it was her first time on a construction site, she picked things up quickly. Tuan occasionally glanced her way. Seeing her toil diligently without a single grumble stirred an unfamiliar feeling in him. A while later, Lin, Tuan's younger sister, appeared. Dressed elegantly, she hurried over to find him. "Big brother, I need to talk to you." Tuan nodded and followed her to a quiet corner of the site. "What's up?" Lin set a stack of documents on a nearby wooden table. "I reviewed the company's charity project list. I think we should invest more in building schools in the highlands. Too many kids still don't have a decent place to study." Tuan studied the papers intently, then nodded. "Good idea. I'll look it over. If it checks out, we'll start next month." After their discussion, Tuan returned to the site. His eyes instinctively sought out Tu Tien, still hard at work. As dusk began to settle and the workers clocked out, Tu Tien wiped the sweat from her brow, letting out a soft breath. A warm, steady voice suddenly sounded behind her. "I'll drive you home." She turned to find Tuan standing there, unnoticed until now. "I can walk." Tuan shook his head, his expression firm. "As your boss, I'm not letting one of my workers walk that far." Tu Tien blinked in surprise, but eventually nodded. On the ride back, she sat quietly, a strange sensation stirring within her. Maybe, just maybe, her life was starting to take a new turn. In a dilapidated wooden house by the roadside, Qian-Chen's ex-husband sat with a group of drinking buddies. The table was a mess, littered with empty bottles and spilled liquor, the sharp stench of alcohol filling the cramped room. Qian threw back a glass, draining it in one gulp, then slammed his hand on the table, his slurred voice thick with drunken bitterness. "My life's a wreck because of that damn woman." A scruffy man in a short-sleeved shirt, exuding a careless air, smirked mockingly. "You let your wife walk out, and didn't do a thing about it, Qian. A man who can't control his woman, letting her live out there free as a bird. People must be laughing behind your back." The group erupted in laughter, but Qian didn't join in. The words cut deep into his already bruised pride. Another man chimed in, his tone even more provocative. "Don't you feel ashamed? I heard some rich CEO's got his eye on her now. Bet she's already shacked up with him." Qian's fists clenched. His body burned, whether from the booze or the rage boiling up to his head, he couldn't tell. Bitch. I'll show her she can't mess with me." Another guy nodded eagerly, egging him on. "Why don't I call some boys to her cave? Teach her a lesson she'll never forget. Let her know you're still her husband." The group roared with laughter and clapped in approval. Chen hurled his glass to the floor, shattering it, and lurched to his feet. "Do it. I want her on her knees, begging me for mercy." One of the men pulled out his phone, dialing with a smug chuckle. "I'm calling them now. In no time that woman will learn what happens when she dares to ditch you." Tien's lips curled into a dark sneer, his face shadowed with malice. Soon after, two thugs dispatched by Qin rolled up to Tu Tien's hut on a motorbike. They stormed in, smashing everything in sight, reducing the fragile shelter she called home to a heap of rubble. Meanwhile, back at her cave, Tu Tien had no inkling of the storm about to hit. She was tidying up after a long day's work, her heart a little lighter now that she had steady employment. But then, an uneasy feeling crept over her. For no clear reason, her chest grew heavy. When she returned to her hut, she found her only refuge demolished, a shattered wreck. Helpless, she sank to the ground, tears streaming down her face in despair. After a long day at work, CEO Tien returned home, but his heart was restless. A lingering sense of unease gnawed at him. He sat in his study, trying to focus on the documents spread across his desk, but his mind kept drifting to Tien's cave. The image of her, silent yet resilient, enduring a harsh life, suddenly filled him with worry. Was she okay? Was something happening to her? Without hesitation, Tuan grabbed his car keys and rushed out the door. His pickup truck sped down the rugged road, headlights cutting through the still darkness of the night. His instincts had never failed him, and this time they urged him forward with even greater urgency. As he neared the cave, he saw a small, lonely figure standing outside. She was crying. He immediately killed the engine and hurried toward her. "Tu Tien, what's wrong?" His voice was deep and steady, but laced with concern. Startled, Tu Tien looked up. Her eyes were red, her face streaked with tears. The moment she saw Tuan, something inside her gave way. "Tuan?" Her voice broke. Tuan's gaze swept over the scene. Scattered belongings, a displaced section of her fragile shelter, signs of destruction were everywhere. He instantly understood. "Who did this?" His voice dropped, dangerous and sharp. Tu Tien wiped her tears, her voice trembling as she spoke. "My ex-husband. He sent people here. They trashed my place. They said I'll never have peace unless I go back to him." Tuan's face darkened. His hands clenched into fists, but he quickly forced himself to stay calm. Does he really think he can force her back with violence? He couldn't believe a man could be so despicable. Looking at Tu Tien now, his heart clenched. She had endured too much. This time, she couldn't hold it in anymore. She wasn't the strong, independent woman she always tried to be. Right now, she was just a fragile girl who had been hurt too many times. She took a step closer, rested her head on his shoulder, and broke down in sobs. Tuan stiffened for a second, but then gently placed a hand on her back, comforting her. "Tu Tien, you're not alone anymore. I won't let them hurt you again." She clutched his sleeve, her tears soaking into his shirt. At that moment, Tuan realized this wasn't just sympathy anymore. He couldn't let her keep suffering like this.
Đôi mắt cô đỏ hoe, bàn tay nắm chặt vào vạt áo cũ. Cô kìm nén để không bật khóc trước mặt những kẻ chẳng chút thương xót cô. Chiếu, người từng đỏ tay gối với cô, người từng hứa hẹn bao điều, giờ đây lại lạnh lùng đứng nhìn không một chút do dự. Cô đã không còn gì trong ánh mắt anh ta. Nỗi đau không còn dừng lại ở những lời miệt thị khi mẹ chồng lớn tiếng đuổi cô ra khỏi nhà. Tự tin gần như quỵ xuống. Cô không biết mình đã làm gì sai ngoài việc sinh ra một trong một số phận bất hạnh. Ngày cô về nhà chồng, cô cũng từng e thẹn bước qua bậc cửa này mang theo bao ước mơ về một mái ấm. Nhưng hôm nay cũng chính bậc cửa đó cô phải rời đi trong tủi nhục, trong sự lạnh lùng của người chồng. Trong ánh mắt khinh bỉ của cả gia đình chồng, cô muốn phản kháng, muốn hỏi chiến rằng anh ta còn chút tình nghĩa nào dành cho cô không. Nhưng rồi cô nhận ra điều đó chẳng còn quan trọng nữa. Cô chỉ là một món đồ bị vứt đi, bị thay thế bởi một người khác. Từ Tiên bước ra khỏi căn nhà đã từng là tổ ấm của mình. Bước chân cô nặng nề như có ai đó trói chặt. Trời không mưa nhưng lòng cô bão tố. Những giọt nước mắt mặn chát lăn nhài trên má hòa vào nỗi đau đớn cùng của một người phụ